Welcome to the Startup Competitors Podcast, where we talk with early-stage entrepreneurs to understand what information they use to inform product roadmap, strategy, and market differentiation.
Welcome to the Startup Competitors Podcast. Today we have Jason Denenberg from NourishWise. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Well, how about we start with a quick elevator pitch for NourishWise?
Sure. So we have built NourishWise to simplify eating healthy for busy employees while enhancing corporate wellness initiatives. And so we're beginning to prove that we can help exchange 1,200 calorie meals for 400 calorie meals and keep people healthy, engaged, and employed.
So if I am a business. So let's say I want to bring you guys in for my employees. What does that actually look like? Is that a mix of software? Is that people? Is that like what does that look like in an implementation?
Sure. So it's some very light software supported by an app. And our differentiating value proposition is that we've got exclusive nutrition data from non-chain local restaurants, in addition to chain data on the nutrition side. And then for our corporate partners, we go a step further and incorporate any on-site food. So if there's a cafeteria, if there's consistently offered snacks, if you're bringing in food from, a service like Fuda, we give you a unique version of our mobile app to deploy to your employees.
Okay, I'm going to go off script here because I'm super interested in this. How do you get them to give you that data? Do you send somebody in on an implementation to talk with their chefs and stuff like that? Or do you just give them in-app, there's an interface for them to add food items and add macronutrient information and stuff like that?
Great question. We want to make it as simple for the end user as possible. And so we are trying to strip the data entry component for the end user because, quite frankly, that's what I have always hated as a user and as a person who struggles with my own eating habits. I wanted to take that away from my own daily experience. But essentially, in short, we have a small army of registered dietitians who do the work to get us the data that we need.
Just want to make sure I understand it. So if I say I want NourishWise for Developer Town, we're in Broad Ripple, Indianapolis. There's probably 10 to 15-ish restaurants immediately around us that people walk through, local restaurants, kind of small, unique experiences. So in that, we don't have a cafeteria, but in that onboarding process, you would send out dietitians to each of those restaurants to make sure that we had the right data?
Yep.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What cities are you guys live in?
Just Nashville now. And so what we're essentially working on is, I'll announce it on here, we're going nationwide with chain restaurant data. So we'll have a national footprint here in the next few weeks. And then we sign large corporations in dense, downtown areas, or at least dense cities. So think about the top 25 cities in the U.S. by population.
NFL cities?
Yep. That's a good way to think about it. Then we will then onboard an appropriate amount of restaurants surrounding that location. Awesome.
Got it. So just touched on current status a little bit. You guys are live in Nashville. Anything else for somebody who's listening, who's trying to figure out where you guys are on the journey, team size, funding, anything you can share, number of customers that can kind of help paint that picture?
Sure. So we raised a very small angel/mentor round last January of 17, so $240,000 on a traditional convertible note. That enabled me to bring on my technical co-founder full-time. We went direct to consumer right out of the gate because it was easier as there's no barrier to entry. And you can get people using the app, beating it up, giving you feedback on what really stinks, needs to be improved, because that's what we needed so that we could be in a better position to go to corporate. And we were devoid of appropriate functionality and measurement capabilities out of the gate with our first version. And then we were completely lacking Android. And so we had to build towards that. And so now as we kind of spun around the new year and this year, my technical co-founder, Sam, did a wonderful job getting us ready on Android and then got us prepared to sell into corporate wellness. And so now we're selling, we've grown our sales pipeline. We think about it as in lives covered, right? And so we've grown our sales pipeline from 10,000 lives to almost 200,000 lives in our sales pipeline in 6 months. we're in the middle of our second fundraise. And so I'm having fun with that dance, trying to secure $500,000 to propel us another 18 months.
Is the pitch to a corporate client, so it's the wellness pitch, right? So you're, if you get your employees to eat healthier, have healthier lifestyles, then medical claims go down over time. Are you also going after any sort of like reimbursement through healthcare providers and things like that? Or is it directly just based on claims data? Or maybe I shouldn't put words in your mouth. What's that pitch to a corporate client?
Yeah. So, this is a complicated and evolving space. And we love that. I mean, as challenging as it can be, it's exponentially more rewarding when we get this deployed and look at the results. It's hard for us to measure individually with NourishWise what someone does with their smoking habit, drinking habit, exercise habit, right? And so that's where bigger platforms that we can plug into come in. The initial pitch is simply this. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics did a study in this country for 3 years. And unfortunately, they found the average dish at a restaurant contains 1,205 calories. That's a substantial majority towards your 1,800 to 2,000 calorie suggested target.
That's
right?
A depressing number.
Right? It gets worse. And as someone that loves food and loves to eat, I'm telling you that unfortunately it gets worse in that they found in that same study the caloric variance when you order at a restaurant in this country that's plus or minus 420 calories, give or take. So essentially when you and your loved ones and people you work with are holding a menu, they either unknowingly or knowingly are kind of looking at 700-ish calories up to 1,670 calories. And it's not all about calories, but I think we can understand that that's a starting framework.
Right.
So back to your question on the pitch. I'm sitting across from the VP of HR, and it's simply, do you want, if your population is similar to the rest of the U.S. population, which now consumes 35 to 50% of their caloric intake from out-of-home dining, if your population resembles that type of stat, like the rest of the U.S., do you want them navigating that range on their own? Or do you want to give them a very simple, sleek, relevant tool to use to help make better proactive decisions around what they eat?
Got it. All right, let's switch gears. When you think of competitors in the space, who are you thinking of? That can be individual companies, that could be types of products. Like when you're thinking of who you guys are competing against in that pitch, who is it?
Yeah, well, so let me start categorically.
Okay.
First category is, kind of the first out of the gate nutrition, which I think a lot of people think of as like MyFitnessPal, right? Rolling up public data or having users enter what they think they're eating and then making that public. So, to pick on them a little bit, there's like 75 banana options in MyFitnessPal for some reason, right?
Right.
And so that's more direct to consumer. It's very simple. There's a pretty darn robust free version. And then you can upgrade to premium if you really want to get serious about tracking macros and beyond, right? And so as a corporation, you asked about competition. Certainly an HR department can just put a link up to educate their employees about MyFitnessPal if they want to go that direction. Now, that does not give any usage feedback, any measurement back to the corporation that I'm aware of in a holistic sense.
Yeah.
So that's one category. You've got, Lose It, kind of more weight management apps, direct to consumer. The second category is kind of, being in Nashville, I'll pick on kind of the coastal themes of growth at all cost mentality, where you've got teams that are trying to build bots that will read the description of a menu online and give you nutritional guesses, right? So that they can quote unquote scale overnight. I would welcome a head-to-head battle on accuracy and dependability there.
If you have nutritionists going out to restaurants, yes.
Yeah. And we're happy to bear that cost as a company because for us, we fundamentally believe that we owe that to our corporate clients and most importantly, our end users to build that trust and that relationship to have that actual data.
Just a quick aside, when one of your nutritionists goes into those restaurants and has that conversation, is that a surprise to the chefs and the owners of that restaurant? Like, not that you would be there, but when they get the results of like how many calories are in their lunch menu, do they look at that and cringe, or are they like, yeah, that feels about like what we thought it would be?
Most often they're shocked, both positively and negatively. Right. I mean, I'm drawing a blank, but on the resource, but there was a study just released recently, maybe it's a university. I'll try to think of it here in a minute. But I mean, they were even quoted as some of the chefs were thinking that, the grilled cheese and tomato soup was one of their healthier options, and look, here's the challenge. Restaurant industry, chain or local, is very difficult. Chefs are trained to build delicious food options and to appeal to our taste buds.
Right.
They are not trained currently to be part of our healthcare system. And so that's, I think, where NourishWise can come in and help bridge that gap for the time being.
Got it. All right. Didn't mean to distract you. So that category was bots, scraping menus. Keep going.
Yep. And so, again, would welcome head-to-head battle there. Then on the other far end of the spectrum, you've got solutions that are targeting chronic disease management and or prevention. And so certainly, companies that come to mind there are like Livongo, right? And their diabetes management, very robust company, doing some very important work around diabetes. We're spending nearly $1 billion a day in this country on diabetes management. And so much of that can be avoided with mostly diet, sprinkle in some exercise, hydration, and sleep, and we can really do some damage on that $1 billion a day expenditure. So I would look at NourishWise as a much more lightweight solution that could be applied to the entire population. Right. So versus trying to only target diabetic population, although expensive and important, we're just a different shape solution. And our price would reflect that.
Most founders start companies because they figured out a better way to solve a problem or serve a need, not because they love tracking payroll, filling out compliance forms, and explaining employee benefits packages. And yet, all that stuff still has to be done. That's why there's Full Stack PEO. Full Stack PEO specializes in turnkey HR for emerging companies, not just those core services, but advice and expertise that help founders maximize employee potential. Curious? Find out more at fullstackpeo.com.
As the employer, one of the things you said when you were talking about the differences between like a off-the-shelf MyFitnessPal versus what you guys are doing, what data do I get to see on my population? So what does employer-side reporting look like? Or is it just a tool that you provide to employees that allows them to better manage their health and there's maybe no visibility back?
Yeah, no, there's certainly visibility. Quite frankly, we're still trying to
figure out what that is.
Like what that's going to be on a consistent level. But what I'll tell you that we are more than happy to offer right now as we continue to get our first, 25 customers is, look, our internal team gets a automated email every morning for each corporate account. And we see every movement inside your corporate account. So if you want data every day, we can send it to you. If you want it once a month with a phone call, I'll meet you once a month on the other end of the phone. If you want a quarterly review in person, I'll be there. Really, we want to learn from our clients what they need and what they want. But we typically start with, how many accounts are created, what's the iPhone to Android split, because HR departments like to know that. We look at restaurants viewed. We look at meals viewed. We look at calories consumed. We look at calories saved. We look at kind of per average calorie consumption per logged meal. And so what we're seeing across the board right now is it's somewhere between 390 to 430 calorie average for a logged meal on our platform. Again, you think about doing more of those frameworks of meals versus 1,205. And you can really start to see a difference. One corporate client is trending this year to save 7 million unwanted calories across 1,000 employees. That translates to 2,000 pounds.
Right.
So you can understand, back to your question on ROI, is it a perfect calculation? No. Is it a step in the right direction? Absolutely.
Are there any, and this is genuine interest, are there any, like there's an app I used a couple of months ago. It didn't survive more than a week, which is telling about me. But one of the things that it did is it was one of the photo food journals, right? You snap a photo of the meal that you eat. It doesn't really track any nutrients, but at the end of the day, you can kind of go in and look and be like, this is what you ate today. Does that feel right? Right? Like, do you feel like that was probably a set of good choices? One of the things that was interesting about that one that I'd never seen before is you had this option after you snap the photo to answer a handful of questions like, did you eat this in your car? Did you eat this at your desk? Did you eat this at a restaurant? Were you at home? Like, so where were you? How did you feel? You would get a prompt like 30 minutes after you ate. How did this meal make you feel? Were you happy? Were you bloated? Whatever the case may be, right? Like, so it went into some of that kind of meta information that I can imagine, particularly the one, like if employees were eating at their desk a lot in my organization, that I could see that being concerning to me, right? Like, well, okay, does that mean we don't have good food options around? Does that mean they're overworked? Does that mean they're not networking with their peers where, that maybe they don't have a group to go out with? Like, all of that could kind of get to like employee wellness to me on multiple levels, right? Like, so that's super
Absolutely.
Interesting. What have you seen around that, or what thoughts have you guys had around things like that? Some of that macro information of just like what, not just the food, but maybe the context around how your employees are eating.
Well, it's a great question, and it's vital that we get to the answer. I'm concerned about how our sector, I'm going to say our sector, I just kind of mean, corporate wellness, and then more specifically nutrition, because it's such a difficult nut to crack, right? I mean, we've strapped bands around everybody to count steps, which is great, but we've got to do better around nutrition, or we just don't have enough steps in the day to offset what we're doing to ourselves. What you describe concerns me with the data we have today is that you're putting too much responsibility and onus on the end user. You started your comment with it lasted a week.
Right.
And so we've got to inverse that completely. And so what I would suggest, and back to the reason that we're happy to bear the cost and get the actual nutrient data and then drive usage that way to simplify the end user experience. And then we can take the data and then show you. So for instance, if, we were shocked to see in one of our first corporate clients that has a very nice, robust on-site cafeteria. We thought the overwhelming interaction would be at the cafeteria, right? I mean, it's in the lobby.
Yeah.
And we were surprised to see that category was actually third in usage. And so it was first category was outside of the building, but within 5 miles. Second category was outside of the building within 10 miles. And then third place was the cafeteria.
Interesting.
And so we can take the usage data and then start reporting
Huge
back.
feedback to the employer, right? Like, what's wrong with our cafeteria?
Right.
Yeah.
Or maybe they've got great groups. Maybe the marketing function is going out to eat, to get out of the building and be more creative. And so we can start feeding, no pun intended, that type of data back, but we didn't require the end user to spend cognitive load to give us that.
Right. So fast forward for me, paint a picture in your mind of this product 5 years from now. Ideally, what would you want it to look like? What are some of the things you're doing 5 years from now that you're not doing today that are exciting to you, that some of the things that you're striving towards?
Well, in 5 years, I want to be, either considered or unequivocally the number one nutrition solution in the U.S. From a product standpoint, we have just forever to go on what we can accomplish to help personalize that experience for an individual user and then scale up across millions of users is important, right? I really want to get to the point where, we've got some designs in how we can make the logging and tracking food automatic to some degree so that we can, again, take less energy from the end user, but capture the data we need, right? And then serve up, pun intended, on what they should be considering as their next meal, either in or out of home, based on what they've eaten in the last 24 hours, the last 2 days, or the last 2 weeks.
Interesting.
Right. The speed of life today is unbelievable, and it's not slowing down, I don't think, anytime too soon. So to the extent that we can at least call a spade and say, our propensity now to dine out or to eat food that you yourself did not prepare in your kitchen is probably going up. And let's realize that and build incredible solutions to navigate that.
Yeah.
Then we can really help. I mean, think about it. I mean, I'm mid-30s. When I was growing up, our parents didn't take us out unless someone had gotten a promotion or someone had died, right? I mean, that's just the way it was. And if we got to order Sprite at dinner, someone definitely had died, right? And so, but that's not the case today. We need to recognize that and build solutions that recognize that and solve for that.
Oh man, I'm feeling like a bad dad right now.
Don't. Do you live in today's speed of life or what the speed of life was that I referenced in 1986?
Right.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for you as a dad or me as a person to have guilt from 1986. That's absurd. Let's just build a better tomorrow.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking of simple things like when we make mashed potatoes at home, right? We are not using a 50-50 potato to butter ratio, right? Like,
oh, my father-in-law is.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah. His favorite word is butter.
Nice.
Yeah.
That would be my partner, Michael. His favorite, when we go to his place to cook, he abuses the butter. That's awesome. All right. So then when you look down that road in the future, because there's some interesting things, like when I look at that business, just as you've described it, right? The database that you're building, if you like, which you are sending nutritionists out, right, is going to be second to none in terms of what's available on the market now, especially for smaller local options,
sure.
Right? So like there's interesting things I can see there from a monetization perspective that obviously don't make sense today because you don't have all that data yet.
Yeah.
Your ability to even potentially be a platform for healthy focused advertising to those employee communities by local restaurants, right? So like, no, we're specifically going to create a menu set that targets people who care about those types of things, right? Like talk a little bit about those types of things that maybe are like secondary or tertiary effects of the platform and the vision that you have that you think are also like interesting game-changing aspects of what you're doing in terms of the overall business model.
Yeah, I mean, you dream about the opportunity to, continue to add layers of value to large constituencies, right? Which is just another way of saying adding revenue. And, I even go out in my mind of thinking about the food service industry, but more importantly, can we help, even if it's a small sector of food supply, right? Let's just take like a funny example. We're obviously trying to target the more healthy minded or people that want to be more healthily minded around what they eat. And so maybe one day the avocado and avocado toast craze calms down a little bit, right? And so on our platform, we see a reduction week over week of avocado toast ordering, but an increase in Sprouts orders comes up around breakfast time, right? And so
I don't think that change is going to happen.
I don't either, right? And so maybe that's part of our sixth year plan, right? But to continue that out, we can help restaurateurs get ahead of that and think about ways to add sprouts to different components of their menu and suggest based on trends in their city.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
How they can think about menu changes with the ingredients that we are nearly positive they have in their kitchen, right? Because we can look across the platform and see, well, they have these 35 different offerings. If we just piece them together in a different way, we can help them create a new menu item on the fly, put it live on the platform immediately, price it accordingly, and they can follow suit.
So when you look at other competitors in the space, it would be interesting if you look at maybe some of the more forward-thinking competition, which I would put the bots in that category, even if they're not necessarily effective today, right? Obviously, they're trying to leverage bleeding edge stuff to push the envelope. What do you see externally in terms of the market? What do you see as some of the coming innovations in nutrition, specifically nutrition tech?
Well, the whole genetic component is fascinating. And I had the opportunity to visit Habit when I was on the West Coast. And I think, what those solutions are aiming for is incredibly powerful.
What's Habit? So
it is a company and starts with a drink formula that, I'm not going to be as good at pitching their company.
Yeah, it's okay.
But essentially they believe, and I follow this belief that, your genetics obviously have a huge component of your overall health. And so, maybe you process proteins differently than I do. And because of that, you might need more or you might need less. But wouldn't it be helpful if you knew that? And so they've got a process where you can follow their onboarding, if you will, to give them data on yourself. And then they have different meals that you can order that fit what comes back for your genetic makeup.
Interesting. Are you, just totally anecdotal to that, are you familiar with uBiome?
A little bit.
A friend of mine turned me on to uBiome maybe a month ago and actually bought the kit and did the swabs and sent it in. And I won't go into the process because it's not right for radio.
Right.
But I got the report back on my biome. And one of the most interesting pieces of it was going into specific enzymes and bacteria that are missing, right? The whole thing is like, get insight into your gut bacteria and flora that are in there. And apparently, somehow, I killed all of my gluten processing bacteria over the years. So, the report basically recommends some things I can do to start building that back up to fix it, as well as specific dietary changes I can do in the meantime that should add energy, decrease weight gain, all sorts of stuff. So it's super interesting how, and obviously your gut is very tied to nutrition, which obviously makes sense, but things that you wouldn't even think of in terms of foods to avoid that, right, could exacerbate these issues. And, and it was like if you eat these types of foods, you're going to feel a loss of energy, right? Not you're going to get a bellyache, but it's just going to affect all these other aspects of your life. And, and they know that just based on what's going on in your stomach at that time. Yeah. Super interesting.
To your competition and kind of what's going on in the space in the future. I mean, look, at the end of the day, our bodies are one of the most amazing machines on the planet. And we are continually looking for ways to fine tune them on an individual level. Right. And I think it's insane that the overall U.S. government suggestion from the USDA is just that everyone should basically target 2,000 calories a day, right? And we can do better than that, right? I mean, I know some say maybe up to 3,000, depending on your, if you're male and you're highly active. I know that there is somewhat of a scale, but we can get much more granular on many different components and then devise solutions and distribution methods of food and nutrition to match that.
Any other nutrition tech trends that you're watching?
I think just the genetic one is really the big one coming with the most impact.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. If people want to learn more about NourishWise, or if somebody's interested in getting in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, NourishWise.com, Jason at NourishWise.com.
Jason, thanks so much, man.
Hey, thanks so much for the opportunity.
If you're thinking of launching a SaaS product, Startup Competitors can provide data on your closest competitors, survey potential users, or provide other product validation services. Learn more at startupcompetitors.com.
Most founders start companies because they figured out a better way to solve a problem or serve a need, not because they love tracking payroll, filling out compliance forms, and explaining employee benefits packages. And yet, all that stuff still has to be done. That's why there's Full Stack PEO. Full Stack PEO specializes in turnkey HR for emerging companies, not just those core services, but advice and expertise that help founders maximize employee potential. Curious? Find out more at fullstackpeo.com.